want to introduce myself. I'm Jared Manning. I'm an assistant state engineer with Division of Water Rights here. I'm over our field services section. Field services covers quite a few things actually, but one of the main things that I concentrate my time on is distribution of water. What I mean by distribution of water is sort of the orderly process in which the water from the natural source gets to the water users that are entitled to have it. If we didn't have a distribution system and an orderly process, it would be chaos. Typically during the year, the demand for the water exceeds what the supply is, unless we're in a flood or in the high runoff time. But most of the season, there's more demand than there is supply. Water rights are distributed by priority, and so the later priorities have to get cut off as the water supply recedes to ensure that those who are entitled to receive the water actually receive it. So that's the process that I'm talking about when I say distribution, and that's going to be the topic of my presentation today. All right. Move on here. The distribution systems have today they operate a lot like they did with the pioneers. There are some differences though, but a lot of the concepts are the same. One of the differences, though, is that today the state engineer has authority for distribution. Early on, it was the smallest type of government, either the city or the county, that managed the distribution of water. Later on, as things became more controversial and there were court cases that were filed, the district court would make a decision and he would appoint a commissioner who would distribute the water. By 1919, the legislature realized that really the state engineer was best equipped to distribute the water in the state, and so the authority went to the state engineer. And then there was sort of a gradual shift on some of those systems that were still being run by the courts, and so that today almost all the systems in the state that have a commissioner are run, supervised by the state engineer. There's a few exceptions out in the Uinta Basin where the court still has the authority to appoint the commissioner and so forth. But these distribution systems, they're really made up of four main components. There's the water users themselves. There's a distribution system committee that represents the water users. There's the water commissioner. He's the man or woman who is out there making decisions, sometimes even turning the head gates, doing the accounting of what's going on. Each system has at least one commissioner. There are some systems that have two commissioners or that have deputies. And then the state engineer, of course, is part of that as well, and I've mentioned that. And so what I'm going to talk about next is the responsibilities of each of these four different aspects of the distribution system and how they all fit together. So first is the water user. If you're just a water user on the system, what do you need to do to participate and to make sure that you get the water that you're entitled to? First thing, and this goes to 90% of all distribution problems that we have in the state, you need to have an adequate measuring device and controlling works. There's no way to know how much water you're taking or to regulate the amount of water that you're taking unless you've got these two things. It's been required in statute for 150 years, maybe 130 years at least. That's the important thing. If you don't have it, your water can be cut off until you get those in place. You get to elect a representative to represent you on the committee. and sometimes you vote to elect somebody. Sometimes you show up to the meeting and you get volunteered to do it. But whatever way, that's the other part that you get to play. And then, of course, you need to pay an annual assessment to help cover the distribution system costs. So I've talked about a commissioner. He needs to get paid. He doesn't get paid out of the general tax money of the state. He gets paid from the water users who are assessed, and so it goes directly from the water users to through the state to the commissioner. Okay, the committee, I've talked a little bit about this. What does the committee do? They've got to represent the water users at the annual distribution meeting. Every year, these distribution committees meet with the state engineer and the commissioner and the water users. They set a budget. They set an assessment amount, which then goes out to the water users, and they select a new commissioner if necessary. Commissioners are appointed to a 4-year term. Some commissioners will serve decades. Sometimes commissioners get replaced for whatever reasons, and what happens is that the committee will go and interview candidates and select who they would like to have as the commissioner, and then the state engineer will appoint who they've selected. Okay, the commissioner, his responsibilities are to distribute the water in accordance with the prior appropriation doctrine. He needs to make sure that those who are entitled to the water receive the water that they're entitled to, which means that those who need to be cut off have to be cut off. And people who are involved in distribution systems, this is a normal process, and they realize, most people, hey, I've got a high water right, it's only going to be available during a certain window of the year, and so it's pretty standard procedure. Sometimes, like recently, as we in southern Utah, conditions have been drier than normal, and we've had to go to extra lengths to reduce water use where people haven't been used to that. And so sometimes it sort of comes as a surprise to people, what you're cutting me off. But on most systems, it's kind of a standard procedure. Commissioner also needs to produce an annual report that shows a record of all his work and also perform any other duties. Sometimes it's maintenance on some of the works and so forth. But whatever is decided on between him and the water users at the meeting. State engineer, he's the last part of this system. His job, first of all, is to appoint the commissioner upon the recommendation of the water users. If a majority of the water users agree on a qualified individual, then the state engineer will appoint them. Occasionally, you'll have a tie, or there's a plurality but not a majority that supports a candidate. In that case, the state engineer will come in and make the case. And that actually happened a couple times this last year. The committees went to hire someone and they were split 50-50, and so the state engineer had to decide. But if there's a majority that agree on somebody, then the state engineer will appoint that person. State engineers also got to manage the water commissioner fund. We talked about the assessments that are set, and so the state engineer mails out these assessments to the water users. They send the money in, and then the state engineer pays the commissioner and the other expenses that have been budgeted by the committee to help with the distribution of the water. Another aspect of what the state engineer does is that he helps to train and direct the water commissioners in distributing the water in accordance with the water rights. I had these in my pocket. I want to make sure I show these. These are tags. We've got an orange tag and a white tag, and sometimes a water commissioner will put these on a head gate. He'll lock it and put, or he'll set it and lock it and put one of these on there. A white tag just means, hey, this is under control of the commissioner through the state engineer. Don't don't adjust the head gate because you'll be subject to fines and punishment. And usually you don't see one of those unless a water user's been monkeying with the head gate. You know, the water commissioner will go out there and set it, and then as soon as the water commissioner leaves, the water user comes out and opens it a little more. That type of thing will sometimes get a white tag. Don't mess with it. Orange or a red tag. This will come up if there's been a state engineer agency action commenced on a water user. Say he hasn't paid his assessment, or he hasn't got a measuring device, or there's some other enforcement action. It might be closed and locked with this attached to it. We don't use these very often. Usually people understand the process, they work with us, and they understand why the commissioner's there. But you know, sometimes people, I don't want to say they get belligerent, but they get belligerent, and you know, we have to tag the head gate or whatever other controlling works that they've got to make sure that they're not taking water that's entitled to somebody else. So that is all the slides that I've got. Any questions about water distribution? Okay, good. Thanks for your time, and I think we're gonna go right into the next one on adjudication.